Government dealt setback in landfill expansion plans. Safety concerns about uranium processing plant in Guangdong province. And China and the US lock horns over Edward Snowden.
Good evening. Discussions on the hotly debated landfill expansion plans have been put on hold at the Legco Finance Committee. Despite the setback, the government could get lawmakers to discuss the proposals again at the council next week. Evelina Leung has more.
Before any discussion on the contentious landfill expansion plans even began, lawmaker James Tian suggested putting an end to it so that other government funding applications could be discussed.
We have a document on civil service pay and NGO pay adjustments. So according to FC Rule 39, I propose to terminate the discussion.
He was supported by many other legislators at the Finance Committee meeting.
Asking them to withdraw it right now on their own volition, they might think that they would lose face and therefore they couldn't put up with it. That's why I think James Tian would share the credit if he is able to get it through.
With Two Moon residents loudly opposing current plans to expand the landfill there, lawmakers demanded that the government withdraw its funding application.
You haven't responded to the residents, and you haven't done the work on the recycling and reduction at source. So the better way is for you to withdraw the paper, and then when everything is done, you can come back.
Lawmakers now want to discuss the plans in October after the Legco summer break.
We need a few more months for the government to thoroughly discuss this issue with the Two Moon residents and the Two Moon District Board. We hope they could come up with an amicable solution.
Outside the council, a show of force by Two Moon and Tai Kung residents against the expansion plans. Even though the funding sought for the Two Moon site is only for a feasibility study, protesters say this is equivalent to the beginning of the landfill expansion process. Some of the protesters here have not ruled out stepping up their campaign to fight against the government's plan if the Legislative Council passes the government's funding application to study the feasibility of expanding the Two Moon landfill. Evelina Leung, TVB News.
Green groups here in Hong Kong have raised concerns about plans to build a uranium processing plant in Guangdong. Many fear the possibility of a radiation leak affecting the health of those living nearby. Rani Samtani has more.
A mass rally was held in the city of Zhongmen today against plans to build a uranium processing plant there. Protesters expressed concern about possible radiation and other nuclear-related risks. There are plans to build a factory to process uranium and to produce fuel for the nearby Daya Bay and Lingao nuclear power plants. Zhongmen authorities have played down safety concerns, saying chances of nuclear radiation are low. They said the amount of radiation exposure per year for factory workers is equivalent to that of taking an X-ray. Still, authorities agreed to extend the project's consultation period in a bid to ease local concerns. Here in Hong Kong, some are also skeptical.
This kind of plant is needed to provide the fuel for nuclear power plants. Without them, they might have to import or transport the fuel from quite a long distance, which will increase the cost of nuclear power. So I would say their major concern is to cut costs rather than really take care of the health for the sake of the local people.
The proposed location of the 230-hectare fuel processing plant is approximately 100 kilometers from Hong Kong. That's raising fears if it would affect the city. Koo said the risk of radiation leaks is not very high, but they still pose a threat and may undermine people's health. He said the Hong Kong government needs to consider the situation because we import a lot of food from the mainland. However, chairman of the Safety Advisory Committee at the Daya Bay nuclear power plant says there's nothing to worry about. Raymond Ho says the emissions released from processing the uranium will produce a very low level of radiation. He also noted that this technology is not new and is a common process used widely around the world. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
Residents in northern Taiwan are bracing themselves for Typhoon Sulik, which is expected to lash the region later today. Schools and offices were closed in many parts of Taiwan in the afternoon as the typhoon neared. The Central Weather Bureau on the island said the storm has weakened somewhat, but was still packing winds of 170 kilometers an hour. Residents have been busy securing boats, removing outdoor light bulbs and securing anything that might be swept away by the strong winds. Many flights between Hong Kong and Taiwan have already been cancelled or delayed. Passengers should check with the airlines for latest flight information. China has agreed to negotiate a bilateral investment treaty with the United States. The move was hailed by Washington as a significant step in China's economic reforms that could level the playing field for American businesses. But 2 days of high-level talks between the two economic giants were also soured by a disagreement over the handling of whistleblowing fugitive Edward Snowden. Alan Booknear reports.
China agreed to open investment treaty talks with the U.S. at the annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue meeting with top U.S. officials. American businesses have been pushing for such a treaty for years, hoping for more protection and market access in China. Minister of Commerce Gao Hucheng said there are differences and barriers on both sides that will be addressed. But the countries were deeply divided over the handling of Edward Snowden. The former spy agency contractor is wanted by the U.S. for espionage, for leaking American surveillance programs. U.S. officials expressed anger that Snowden was allowed to leave Hong Kong for Moscow last month.
When we encounter differences or sensitive issues, we need to address them directly in consultation with one another. And that is why we were very disappointed with how the authorities in Beijing and Hong Kong handled the Snowden case, which undermined our effort to build the trust needed to manage difficult issues.
State Councillor Yang Jiechi responded by saying Hong Kong authorities deemed they had no grounds to hold Snowden, and Beijing had to respect Hong Kong's handling of the case according to law. Snowden, meanwhile, is still holed up in the transit lounge of a Moscow airport, despite asylum offers from at least 3 countries. An airport spokesman confirmed Snowden has a meeting set up later today with human rights groups that were invited to meet with him. It's unclear what will be discussed. Alan Booknear, TVB News.
Next, a landmark vote in the Irish Parliament. Lawmakers approved a bill that, for the first time, grants abortion rights to women under certain conditions. The vote followed months of fierce debate between abortion supporters and opponents in the predominantly Catholic country. 127 lawmakers voted in favour of the bill, 31 against. It legalises abortions in cases where doctors believe the woman's life is at risk from the pregnancy. The government drafted the bill in response to a case last year in which a woman had suffered a miscarriage, died after being refused a termination. While the outcome was expected thanks to Prime Minister Enda Kenny's parliamentary majority, opponents warn it would result in greater abortion rights for women in Ireland in future.
What began as a peaceful one-day strike across Brazil descended into violence on the streets of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Tens of thousands of workers across Brazil walked off their jobs yesterday to demand better working conditions and improved public services. About 2,500 strikers marched in Rio de Janeiro and some clashed with police during the evening. Several street barricades were set on fire and at least one bank and a police post were destroyed. Video footage showed protesters running away as police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to break up the disturbances. President Dilma Rousseff has promised reforms, but many doubt she could deliver before next year's elections.
Security forces in Indonesia have retaken control of an overcrowded prison in the western part of the country after a jailbreak there. And they have recaptured at least 64 of about 240 inmates who escaped. Prisoners set fire and started rioting last night at the facility in Medan, the capital of North Sumatra. They had complained about a lack of water and electricity. At least 5 people were killed. Some of those who escaped were convicted terrorists. Authorities said the situation is now under control after soldiers entered the prison without encountering resistance. It holds about 2,600 inmates. The jail has a capacity of just over 1,000. Finding no evidence of mechanical failures, a probe into the Asiana Airlines crash continues to point to pilot error. But safety officials warn it could take a year before a final decision is made. As Sonia Artero reports, 911 calls concerning the crash revealed survivors were left unattended for some time.
The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board has concluded its on-site detective work surrounding the Boeing 777 crash landing of Flight 214. But so many questions still need to be answered, such as a blinding flash of light the pilot controlling the plane claimed he saw right before landing.
Neither of the other 2 pilots identified the source of light. It was not discussed on the CVR.
Pilots still need to explain why they hadn't a clue they were flying too low until 9 seconds before crashing.
About 5 seconds later, and about 3 seconds before impact, there is a call for a go-around. There is a second call for a go-around at 1.5 seconds prior to impact.
Pilots also need to clarify why they thought the plane's speed was being controlled by an auto throttle, when in fact the plane was flying so slow it triggered a warning it was about to stall.
There is no anomalous behavior of the autopilot, of the flight director, and of the auto throttles.
Several emergency calls following the crash confirmed passengers were left unattended at the crash site.
Our airplane just crashed upon landing, and I think we need some answers out here as soon as possible.
Airport, and we just got in a plane crash, and there are a lot of people that need help.
The NTSB has reached no firm conclusion yet and say their final evaluation could take more than a year. Relatives of the 2 Chinese girls killed in the crash arrived at their hotel in San Francisco. ASEAN officials are working to finalize a compensation plan before the families head back to China. Over in South Korea, students mourn the death of the 2 young girls killed in the crash. Among their condolence letters are messages wishing the girls well in the afterlife. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
In the Canadian province of Quebec, crews continue to search for the remains of 50 people presumed to be killed in Saturday's horrific oil train derailment and fire. Quebec's Prime Minister Pauline Marois toured the traumatized town and had harsh words for the head of the U.S. rail company involved in the crash. She said she found it deplorable that Edward Burkhardt, CEO of Railworld, didn't show up at the Lac-Mégantic until Wednesday, 4 days after the crash. Burkhardt had stayed in Chicago, saying he was better able to communicate from there. He blamed the engineer for failing to set the brakes properly before the unmanned train hurtled down an 11-meter incline. 5 of its cars carrying oil derailed and exploded. And still ahead in the news, concerns about how ethnic minorities are doing in Hong Kong. Probe completed into North Point lift plunge. And Aussie teenager shines at the Ashes.
Welcome back. Integration is key. That's the message lawmakers drove home today at a LegCo panel meeting on how to help ethnic minorities. The government was today commended by lawmakers for improving certain services for the city's ethnic minority population of about 450,000 people. But as always, there's much more to be done. Civic Party lawmaker Kenneth Chan said he's happy to see more facilities provided for people who have different needs, but pointed out it's even more important to help them integrate into Hong Kong society.
Because they are Hong Kong people. Even if they are a transient population, they are part of the population. In fact, many of them have been here for generations, so we can put ourselves into their shoes.
He raised the example of Hong Kong people settling overseas and becoming a minority there, saying it would be strange to be offered line dancing activities, but nothing to help integrate them into a different culture. Right now, the language barrier isn't just a problem for those who moved here.
What is surprising to me is that locally born EMs also have this language problem. If this goes on, they will remain near the poverty line and they may only take up menial work, and this can become a time bomb for the Hong Kong society.
Lawmakers pointed out that integration is especially important to prevent ethnic minority youth from being lured into criminal involvement. Secretary for Home Affairs Zhang Dak-seng, for his part, said he understands the importance of integration and that more minority groups will be invited to meetings with the government to better understand how to make that happen.
Well, I think the crux of the matter is that ethnic minority children do not have the opportunity to enjoy equal opportunities in schools, so that they have a second-rate education. They fail to learn Chinese at school, and therefore this affects their educational opportunities, their chances of getting into universities and getting good jobs after university. And so the key is education.
The government has concluded its investigation into what caused a lift to fall to the ground in North Point earlier this year. The company that serviced the lift could be prosecuted for the incident that left 7 people injured. This was the scene at the Kings Road building after the accident. The lift had just gone up to the first floor when it suddenly dropped down onto safety springs below. Today's report confirms suspicions that the lift's 4 cables had all snapped at the same time, causing it to plunge.
And this sort of situation, we believe that the rope has been lubrication and maintenance for a very long time period. And we believe that it is over 12 months. The external wire or the suspension rope at the breaking point has disappeared. And the fiber core of the suspended rope was also disappeared.
A badly connected spring and rust on the mechanism designed to stop a fall meant there was no safety backup system. The report found that Scheinfeld Engineering, the contractor responsible for servicing the lift, had replaced the cables in September 2010, but poor maintenance caused them to wear out. The Deputy Director of the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department was scathing. He said it's absolutely unacceptable and that the contractor, the person in charge and the engineers must be criminally liable. In March, Scheinfeld's license was suspended for 6 months. The Electrical and Mechanical Services Department has handed the latest findings to the Department of Justice.
Results of the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education, or DSE exam, will be out next Monday. The Education Bureau has standardized the DSE grading system this year, but students still find it hard to calculate their total scores in the university applications. Vicky Kong reports.
It's not just students who are confused with the calculation of DSE scores.
I know my grades are correct or wrong because my teacher is also confused about the career. Yeah.
Different universities have their own formula when calculating the scores of DSE students. While the University of Hong Kong adds up the scores of the best 5 subjects to form a benchmark, Lin-Nan University takes the average mark of the best 5 subjects. Subject weighting for the same program can also be different from last to this year. This boy says different subject weightings at different schools and programs confuse him. One teacher has a suggestion.
The first step they have done is to unify the calculation score. Let's say 5 stars is 7 in all universities now, but last year some is 6, some is 7. We'll let the parents or students mix up. And the second step, I think in the future, is to make the calculation formula the same.
Among all the universities, Chuck thinks Hong Kong University of Science and Technology has the most user-friendly calculation system, as it has an online score calculator. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
So, Etienne, I hear England's being beaten by Australia.
Yes, they will come back, but unfortunately for England, a star was born at Trent Bridge yesterday. Teenager Ashton Agar lifted Australia to a 65-run first innings lead over England in day 2 of the Ashes. Jameson Wong has more.
It was the highest score by a number 11 in Test history. 19-year-old first-timer Ashton Agar was 2 runs short of a century off 101 balls. His last wicket partnership with Phil Hughes of 163 was also a Test record and lifted Australia to 280 all out and a first innings lead of 65.
It's a dream come true, really. That's what it is to me. Forever I've dreamt of playing Test cricket for Australia, and for my debut to start the way it has, I'm over the moon. I'm very happy.
The hosts ended the day at 80 for 2 and a slim 15-run lead. Jameson Wong, TVB News.
And to football news now, and Wayne Rooney will be sidelined for up to a month with a hamstring injury. Rooney left Bangkok the first leg of Manchester United's pre-season tour of Asia and has returned to England. The striker will also miss out on the team's visit to Hong Kong. Meanwhile, crosstown rivals Manchester City are in South Africa. Their new manager Manuel Pellegrini paid tribute to ailing former President Nelson Mandela. Pellegrini's first game in charge of City will be a friendly in Pretoria against SuperSport United. And at the Gold Cup, Mexico defeated Canada 2-0. Raul Jimenez scored with a powerful header late in the first half for Mexico's first goal. Marco Fabian added a penalty in the second half as the Mexicans rebounded from last weekend's 2-1 loss to Panama. El Tri has struggled recently with 3 wins in 14 games. They're also in danger of missing out on next year's World Cup. And in baseball, New York Yankees captain Derek Jeter made his season debut after a 9-month injury layoff. Jeter singled in his first at-bat against the Kansas City Royals. The 39-year-old went 1 for 4 with an RBI. However, he left the game in the 8th inning with a minor leg injury. The Yankees went on to win 8-4.
And that's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.
Good evening. Locally, the weather was mainly fine and very hot. Temperatures in most places rose to around 34 degrees in the afternoon. And as tonight's situation chart shows, under the influence of ultra-subsiding air of severe Typhoon Sulik, the weather is very hot over southeastern China. Today's temperatures ranged from 27.5 to 32.6 degrees, and the relative humidity was between 60 to 87%. Light to moderate west to northwesterly winds. The current temperature is now 30.4 degrees Celsius, with the relative humidity standing at 73%. The very hot weather warning is now in force. So Freddie, how's the weather tomorrow? There will be a few showers tonight, isolated thunderstorms at first. It will be mainly fine and very hot with some haze tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 28 and 33 degrees. It will be cloudy with showers in the next couple of days. Tomorrow's API is forecast at 30 to 110, and the pollution level will range from medium to very high. And the maximum UV intensity forecast for tomorrow will be about 11. And here's the latest global weather update. Showers in Shanghai, rain in Taipei and Xiamen. Showers in Guangzhou, bright in Macau, cloudy in Chengdu. Cloudy in Beijing, rain in Seoul, bright in Tokyo. Thunderstorms in Bangkok, rain in Ho Chi Minh City and Manila. Showers in Kuala Lumpur, thunderstorms in Singapore, rain in Jakarta. Thunderstorms in New Delhi, showers in Karachi, rain in Mumbai. sunny in Cairo. Bright in Brisbane, sunny in Sydney, rain in Melbourne, showers in Auckland. Sunny in Toronto. Cloudy in Vancouver, bright in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Sunny in London and Paris, showers in Zurich. And that's the weather. Have a lovely evening.